Om Shanti. Good evening. Welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. And our topic in this session is food for the mind. But first, let's start with a reflection. Just as there is the physical mouth of the body, when it comes to me, the soul, the thinker, the being inside, the mouth of the soul is the mind. Through the physical mouth, we can express and also consume. And the same applies to the mouth of the mind. Constantly creating thoughts, even right at this second. Can observe the mind speaking, the chattering of the mind, creating thoughts. But the mind also can be busy in consuming, chewing on ideas. I, the soul, can feed my own mind ideas to chew on, to think about. More often than not, we leave our mind unsupervised. And it chews on what it's familiar with. Reactions to the outer world. But when I pay attention, begin to guide the mind what to chew on, I can begin to feed my mind very rich, elevated spiritual food. Think about the idea of being a soul. Consider the self to be a soul. And the mind becomes busy chewing on this so that I can experience it. So it can go deep into me. Because just as we say with the body, you are what you eat. The same applies to me, the soul. What the mind reflects on, chews on, shapes my sense of self. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. And welcome to those who have just joined. So our topic for the next 2 sessions is food for the mind. And
for May and June, we'll be looking at sustenance on a spiritual level and different aspects of that. So it's timely as well, since Mother's Day lands in May, and this is a lovely request. So just even this listening to the commentary, a thought that came to mind in terms of it's on a physical level, but I really enjoy that we often look at what that looks like, and on a subtle level, spiritual level, what that looks like. So when it comes to physical food and chewing on food, would you say there's like different standards or levels of absorption? So then on a spiritual level, that could be as well.
Yeah, we do talk physically that we can chew on food, but what the body actually will use and absorb can vary with different bodies. And so this is something that, we would be concerned about physically. And, I remember the first time I sort of really heard this concept was something about having orange juice with oatmeal, because you would really take all the nutrients from the oatmeal, but alone it's different, because we are concerned about what we eat, but also are we absorbing what we eat? So that concern goes spiritually as well, that I could be chewing on some ideas, but what actually is being accepted deep into the self? What am I actually using and experiencing? We talk about different levels of penetration, the intellect, etc. And so also I should be concerned, okay, what conditions will make it possible for me to absorb more deeply what the mind is chewing on?
Reason why this came up was just with the commentary. The thoughts are kind of common in terms of, there's mindfulness and making sure that I'm thinking about certain things. Is there a possibility that one may not be absorbing anything?
Yeah. There's always space for, I suppose, a little bit of self-deception. First, obviously, we want to look at the content of what we're thinking about, of course. So I could be mindful about something, but is it something that's really connected to my objectives? So we want to be mindful about that. But also, there can be that sort of deception of, yes, I'm thinking about it. My mind is. So we have this term mantra, which means that which frees the mind, actually. So it's not a bad word. It sometimes gets a bad reputation because it's been connected to repetition and ritual. So not necessarily that feeling of absorption, but actually I'd have to be absorbing if I'm fulfilling the true meaning of the word, to free the mind. So what I like about what's being suggested with a mantra, just as I remember so many different nutrition workshops, I'm around nutritionists a lot, and so they're always hearing them say this idea that you should chew your food so many times, before you swallow. Chew your food, because that will help the body to absorb it. And I really like that, because that's kind of like a physical mantra. I'm like over and over and over, right? But the objective, obviously, I'm very careful about the content of what I'm chewing on. The objective is to help the body to digest. And similarly, I want to take that time. I want to give time for that absorption. So I do want to chew. I do want to repeat, but not in an empty or ritualized way. That's a bit like chewing, and then spitting it out. So I really want to repeat, but each repetition should be a very good quality. I'm not gumming the food when I'm actually breaking it down in the mouth. So also each repetition is grinding. Each time I say, I am a soul, it's like, I want to check. Did I feel that? Because it's remarkable, even as you're listening now, I can say something and it's completely numb, feel nothing. It's like I gummed it, right? I'm a soul, but there's absolutely no change in my feeling, versus and there are indicators that we use, detachment's top of the list, or freedom, or light. So if it is actually happening, there will be a ripple effect. There will be significance attached to the experience.
So what are what I would say blocks capacity to absorb, then like trying to grind? Maybe you're saying it and not feeling anything.
When we ask people this, they almost always immediately give the response, which is fear. We sort of have an inner, the course, the Raj Yoga material explains that we are trying to reclaim our inner kingdom. There has been a coup d'etat inside, and foreign forces, if you will, are sitting on my inner kingdom. Illusions are ruling my inner world. And so I want to claim my kingdom back. I want truth in my kingdom. But of course, the illusions will not let go that easily. So there's a lot of resistance. It's not fear necessarily on one's own part, but there's this resistance from the opposition forces within. So that looks like a lot of self-sabotage, which can include self-deception. So this can be blocking. There's so much detachment connected to change, right? So change means I don't stay the same. So I'm going to have to let go of the status quo in order to change. And that involves a letting go. Letting go is always connected to fear.
So with these aspects of self-deception, then the intent is to let go. Are there certain things on an internal level that I can do, take care of to increase that capacity to absorb, to grind?
I remember once early in my Brahmin life being told we have this capacity called the intellect, which is intended to reason, decide, discern, understand. And the phrase used was the intellect reassures the self, really supports, helps the self to understand. Because fear, we know, is false evidence appearing. It's ignorance. It's a lack of understanding. So, one of the things I used to sort of do and still do is okay, I'm not the body. Oh, look, I'm still okay. so really trying to, anytime and psychologists will tell you this, when it comes to fear, is to look at it and sort of break it down and see what's going on there. So using understanding to help the soul work through the fears it might have. But as well, I think so much patience, and the big one, you've got to want it bad, really. The thing about fear, the equation with fear and change, is that we don't change until the pain of staying the same is greater than the fear of change. So this real deep, deep, pure desire, I'm ready to change. I know we've talked about readiness and timing a lot, so we won't go into that.
That topic about readiness was helping to prepare, I suppose, for this topic. Yeah. So I know in a way we sort of dove into this, but I think it can be perceived as a very common topic out there, food for the mind. But we obviously, there is an intention as the sessions go by for the next 2 months to go a bit more subtle for each one. So it was interesting because the request to was originally about what is called sattvic food, and that was about this aspect about physical food and our relationship with it. What do you think is the relationship between this whole thing about sustenance and why food of the mind is so important?
It's interesting when we talk about food of the mind and then the sattvic diet, the diet for the body. What I found for myself is that the physical diet naturally shifted because of what I was feeding my mind. The ideas I was feeding my mind changed my sensitivities so that the shift in the physical diet was very natural. And I think that goes under any kind of food change. It helps a lot to have that deep shift in understanding, a shift in sensitivities. And then it comes very naturally. So I find, that if things can always happen from the inside out, they're always have a much better chance of being sustainable versus the more violent approach from the outside in. It's very interesting because on the surface they look the same. It looks like a discipline around diet. But one is without understanding. It's just guilt or shame or should or whatever. It's from the outside in, and it's not necessarily sustainable. But when it's happening from a deep shift inside out, then the possibility of sustainability is far greater. So starting with food for the mind is a very interesting place to begin, even lifestyle changes.
Could you elaborate further when you say it's an interesting place to start?
I don't think we necessarily think of it that way, is we sort of hear you should do this, you should do that, and we just kind of dive into the physical changes.
Well,
But
it's easy to see, like
it's
there's
easy to
progress.
see, it's the show and all these sorts of things. I know when I came into the study, I had been told fairly early about the diet. And I don't know why it was this way. It was like, okay, yes, I can see that's where this is all going, and that's fine. But I was never a dive into the deep end kind of person. I don't know. There was something inside that said, keep fleshing the knowledge through your intellect, through your mind. Just keep doing that. The changes will happen naturally. They're happen in their own time. And so that was my approach. So it was extremely natural. And I was kind of observing and amazed at how the sensitivities would shift on their own. The power of working with the soul, with the self as a spiritual being is incredibly effective versus ignoring what's happening spiritually completely and just doing it on the physical level. I'm not saying it can't work as well, but it's quite because it's so subtle. It's really neat to watch, but I think for many it doesn't feel very effective because it's so quiet.
It's very connected to this aspect about, food. Why? Because I've heard of that phrase, food for thought. And that's even though you've heard mindfulness, you should take care of your thoughts. In basically just watching ourselves through the day. I don't know how much, even though we have these things out there, we talk about it, that we don't really seem to actually be able to be really actually attentive to it.
Yeah, I think one has to be extremely motivated. Just before coming into this session, we were listening to an interview, and what I took away from it was, again, the power of understanding is massive. if the penny drops. And if if I'm given a different understanding of myself and I accept it, and that's the key word again, back to the absorption piece, if I accept it, it's going to create a natural shift. So I will then be very motivated, intrinsically driven to pay attention to those changes. And I think it really weakens the effect of the opposition forces within. So understanding, again, when I'm chewing on this, understanding can make a big shift without any violence in terms of paying attention. Suddenly it's sort of like I'll be eating something physically and I just eat it. And then one day it's like I actually stop and really pay attention, like really taste it and sort of spit it out. It's like, why have I been eating this? It just might suddenly be aware of the taste of it. And so I think that during the day, our mind is constantly consuming. There's lots of media, social media, news. There's just constantly stuff. It's just oversaturated what the mind is being bombarded with. And we don't really stop and check, how does the mind feel chewing on this stuff? Like, is it making it peaceless? Is it making it anxious? And I'm not talking about the head in the sand. If I want my mind to be peaceful and strong, to be able to process what's going on around me in an effective way, then I need to be careful about what I'm feeding it. I could be feeding it things that actually make the mind and me weaker.
So does one have to be quite proactive, or are you just an observer of what's going on in the mind?
I think you do have to be proactive. I think observing is where it begins. You sort of, this is where diet changes always begin. They always say, keep a journal, watch what you eat. The emotions are connected to when you're eating what, all of this. It applies spiritually as well. What do we chew on at certain moments in the day? So I think paying attention, but then, getting guidance and implementing and having a program that's not violent, that incorporates a lot of understanding and a lot of patience is really important.
If we were able to attach a wire to your head, and if you can recall what it was like in the early days when you were starting, I know that I've heard that it was quite an organic start when you're coming into this study. But I know you read a lot of aspects of Raja Yoga. So I don't know if you recall what was going on internally in your thinking, or you're trying to grind, like what it looks like through the day. Is it like a dialogue? Is it like a script? Could you feel when it just felt quite robotic, and when it felt like you were really chewing and grinding?
Well, one of the things I'll say is that the observation of the self improves as one moves along in the study. So whatever I was observing back there probably was at a very gross level in terms of self-observation. I think there was a mix of things. I don't know if there was full awareness of everything going on in my mind, but I was very captivated, very attracted by the knowledge of Raj Yoga and enjoy. I don't know if I use the word meditation really, although I suppose most would call it. I just enjoyed thinking about the ideas. And we have this period, we call it the honeymoon, when that happens quite without any resistance at the beginning. But I think soon after, other crazy resistance forces reared their head and started to interfere with being able to freely think about these. But I do remember really, really enjoyed thinking about the ideas and would write about them and really try and create structure to help me focus on the ideas. It wasn't just repeating them, but I really wanted to unpack the significance of what I was being exposed to. So I'd write essays, and of course I was listening to many classes. So trying to, just like in food, food's very interesting because on the plate, it has a certain look. We like it to be attractive. not to go into details, what it actually looks like inside is very different. And all the body cares about, the body doesn't care what it looks like. The body just cares about what's the nutrients I can extract. What's the significance of what I've just eaten? What's the nutrient? And that's what I really felt, is I wanted to extract the significance or the power of these ideas. And those who are elite athletes, they're scientific about their diet. They really don't care what it looks like. They just want to know what's the nutrient value, the significance.
So you would write a lot, you would listen a lot, and you read a lot.
Yeah.
Did you find that when you were, because I'm guessing that you're extracting significance when you're, especially I'm assuming from writing, did you find it was easy, difficult, was a challenge, or in terms of taking that significance into your day-to-day life?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's still a work in progress, the conversion of that, because, we're so enamored with it that we want to be the embodiment of it yesterday, So definitely there was, this very clear gap between these wonderful ideas, the potential of the human spirit and what was happening in day to day. And, I might have a second here or there. Wow, I think I embodied something, but the rest of the time it was pretty ordinary. So there was a big gap. But, one of the beautiful things embedded in the knowledge, again, is that patience, that sense, that faith. You will get there, but you need to get there honestly. Right. So I think most of us fall into the trap of trying to put on a show, trying to look like a Raj Yogi. And we have to work our way through that. And then actually we start to become a Raj Yogi, and that's okay. But we want to get there honestly.
So what's going on? I mean, it's quite interesting where it's like the knowledge is very, very vibrant. It's very meaningful. And I won't even use the word logical sense. It's deeper than that. And then, you learn that your soul, you want to feel it. You have these significance when you write it or reflect on it. Everyone's playing their part. And next thing, you're in a scene and someone's screaming at you.
What kind of
Just
scene
using
is
this as an example.
Right?
And you're like telling them they're just playing your part. And, like the significance was, I'm just using as a bad example, thinking off the top of my head that there's significance when you reflect on it, but it doesn't seem to be so vibrant when it comes to being in an actual scene or situation.
If someone, I knew someone who had been on and it was no one's fault. It's just what happened in the drama, but a certain diet for a period of time, and actually got to the point where it was having quite severe physiological effects. And then after a while, things were and they shifted the diet, and it took quite a while for that shift in diet. This is a physical example, for those physiological changes to shift as well, to catch up with the shift in diet, for the body to absorb the new diet. It took a long time. And I wonder if that kind of happens a bit for us spiritually, that we've been on really a crazy diet of ideas and beliefs for a very long time, and our body actually adjusted to it. It was making us sick spiritually, but we sort of just adjusted to it, and it came out the way it, just as physiologically things were happening. So this crazy diet, these odd beliefs we have, comes out in wacky and reactive behavior. So even as we start to go on to the new diet that's connected to dignity, dignified behavior, the old wacky behavior keeps happening, because it's taking a while for the soul, to absorb, to embody this new diet. But it will happen. It will happen as long as I'm very faithful to the new diet.
So, with relevance to food of the mind, is it kind of as if, because I'm so used to this diet, while I'm trying to chew on this diet, I'm still, unfortunately, still eating.
We're secretly on the side snacking on. Judy's very bad at that, secretly snacking on other things. Yeah, so we're still consuming some of the old ideas. In fact, some of it's so automatic we don't even know we're consuming the old ideas. So this, to have that pure spiritual diet for the mind is quite an achievement. We still might be mixing in some of the old ideas and beliefs.
No, it's interesting. I remember knowing a couple of individuals who've lived in very poor settings growing up. So for them, and this is a physical example, it's like, like where I come from, there's like no food. I'm just eating grass in my backyard, kind of a situation. So now they're grown up, and it's a physical example, but it's interesting. I was thinking about that. They're like, I'll eat anything now. I mean, at least I have food to eat. But it was making me think about that we are now quite numb to just eating, consuming anything with our thoughts, and quite desensitized to that. And what maybe this is a part of the whole spiritual readiness piece is it just come to a point in time, perhaps internally, feeling that something has to shift, and maybe they don't even realize what's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think what we usually suffer from is just lack of knowledge. If there was some sort of machine that could show the effect of vibration, of intention, which gets embedded into food, the effect that that has on us, because souls are very concerned about, food, physical food on a very superficial level. But if we could, in physical food, see the intention and vibration and the impact that's having on me, the soul, if we also had a machine that could show the impact of certain thoughts on me, the soul, if there was some way we could show that, that would maybe be very sobering. But again, we're talking about addiction. So they'll show people, for example, who chronic smokers, what's happened to their lungs, really horrific images, and they still don't stop because it's addictive, and they're very aware that they're killing themselves. So dealing with addictive thinking behavior, this is no small thing and requires incredible compassion. But yeah, if we could see the effect of certain thoughts on our behavior, the effect of vibration and intention on our food, that might help us to make some shifts. So,
It's some other thoughts, many, many questions have come up that would be very useful if we had more time. Of course, we can continue next week. But when you were sharing, I was thinking about positive affirmations. Where does that land in terms of, as we're wanting to take care of our thoughts, is it not enough just to repeat something to yourself? I will make it, I will make it. That there are things out there like The Secret where you just have good thoughts about good outcomes, and many have attested it works.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going on there. One has to do with consuming something and it works. It's a bit like when I go into the store and again, so many nutritionists around me that they will talk, and it's just really fascinating what they talk about. I remember once one workshop, and I was only because I was doing the spiritual component, so we were sharing. So I was listening to her share. I was like, wow, that's so. This is very common in packaging food, where in the industry, the food industry, they figure out what keywords consumers are wanting to hear at this time. And for example, they'll have, low on sugar or something, whatever. And she'll explain, you need to look very carefully at the ingredient. They're saying this, but it's actually not really true. There's some other things mixed in there. What kind of sugar source? And she'll just go into that. Certain sugar sources has this effect on the body. They're slow in sugar, but they're still using this. So she was just going into all this. It was quite frightening, actually. And I find sometimes we have, positive affirmation, at least is keeping me out of trouble. But, it sounds really good, but let me look a little bit deeper at the ingredients. Is there desire mixed in there? Because that's going to have repercussions. That's actually going to lead me in the opposite direction I want to go. So I just need to look a little bit deeper at the methodology of whatever I'm embracing. With what I'm asking my mind to do, is there other stuff mixed in there, even though it sounds good on the surface? So the example you gave, of these positive affirmations, I hope this happens, I hope this happens, that's fine, but be careful what you ask for, right? So I'm throwing all my heart and everything into putting everything I've got behind a certain request of the universe. And then I get it, but then it leads to this whole other sequence of events I did not anticipate, because embedded in my request was a desire or an attachment or fear or unworthiness. And that's going to lead to some consequences. So these hidden things. So I have to be very careful about what I am affirming with my thoughts. The other piece of I'm affirming, and it doesn't work, is that whole iceberg phenomena of, on the conscious level, I'm repeating something, but at the subconscious level, I'm actually repeating something else. So we sort of call this phenomena of, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Right? But on the superficial level, I'm saying yes, but deep inside, I'm actually saying no. So I don't actually believe it.
So this could also be about being a soul, that there's so much fear. You're wanting to.
Yeah, right. So I'm saying I'm a soul, but meanwhile, I'm thinking about my son, my husband, my job. I mean, these are contradictory behaviors. So it's never really going to go very far. So I need to check these two things. Are there other ingredients mixed into the food I'm feeding my mind? It appears good on the surface, but I need to really check what intentions, exactly what's driving it. That's one thing. But also, out of fairness to the self, I really need to look honestly at how much have I accepted this? And that can take time. Even though it looks good and I want to, and I know it's good in my heart, there's some blockage there. And so I need to just understand that. Understanding can melt a lot with that patience as well.
Well, thank you. I think understanding, I think we covered it before, but it seems to be a really deep topic in terms of what exactly is understanding and what am I actually doing? So we will continue with food for the mind next week as well. And then we'll just continue to gently transition to the more subtler aspects. So I guess we should go into a little reflection.
One of the most common words my mind munches on during the day is the word I. How much my mind is consumed with this word I. It's a very small word. It looks like a tiny morsel of food for the mind, but there is so much concentrated within that morsel. And it's very important. What is contained within that morsel that I am feeding the mind when I say I? Is it an I based on external identities, temporary identities? Is it an I that is begging for value? Is it an I that has so much fear of change, very reactive? So, what concept of I is my mind chewing on? And how can I start to transform the I that my mind is consuming? Injecting new ingredients, new understanding, into this word I, and very patiently allowing my mind to chew on it as frequently as possible, trying to extract the fragrance, the essence, the taste. I am a soul. I am a child of God. I am eternal. I have intrinsic worth. Very short sentences packed with massive amounts of nutrient. Quite a challenge sometimes for the mind to absorb. So being patient as I feed my mind a new diet around this word I. Om Shanti.
Well, thank you for those for joining, and thank you, Judy. Always putting you on the spot on questions. And so we will continue with food for the mind next week. And if you have questions or if you have topics that you would like to be addressed in the interview with Raj Yogi, you can always email us as well. You can always share in the chat box. So I will pass it back to you, Judy, for upcoming sessions.
So we do have a special session coming up on Sunday. It is the third Sunday of the month, which of course means World Meditation Hour from 6:30 to 7:30. But just before, I believe on Zoom and YouTube, or just YouTube? Zoom. Okay, so on our Zoom platform, we will definitely send a notice out by email, but we'll have a session on forgiveness. So that will be at 5:00 p.m. And okay, so we'll record it for uploading to Zoom if we get consent from the participants. But that will be on May 16th, 5:00 p.m., a session on forgiveness. And then a little break in between, so you can then join if you wish and chew on the ideas of the session during World Meditation Hour, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. The rest of our programming will continue through the month as it is. Drop-in meditations Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. Full hour on Sunday, and interview with a Raj Yogi on Tuesday evenings. Inner fitness Saturday afternoons, 2 to 3 on Zoom. And self-care, 4 to 5 on Saturdays on YouTube. Om Shanti.